Hi everybody, this is Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films, and we're back at the archive. Very excited to be back after a week of being on the road in New York City. And wow, speaking of awesome and feeling good, like look what I found. It was behind a stack of tapes. I'm super excited to have this back in my life. And anyways, let's watch some films. So we'll start off with a Bell System film, which is an office safety film called Jack and Jill. Then we'll watch National Dairy Council's Whenever You Eat. It's interesting, all the nutritional films in the early 20th century were made by the Dairy Council, so they could make sure that people would mention milk as one of the food groups. Then Jam Handy talks about GM engines in More Than Machines. This baffling but beautiful film next, called All About Polymorphics. Then we'll end up with Watercolor Painting, The Marine Scene with Herb Olsen. I'm hoping that he is as chill as Bob Ross. I mean, I can't imagine someone being super energetic when it comes to watercolors, but who knows? Anyways, thanks for watching today. We'd love to your support, and one way you can support us is by hitting the thumbs up button or the like button. You can also go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks, or use the super thanks button in the YouTube comments. Those are great ways to support us. We're doing a show tomorrow in Brooklyn at Light Industry at 7:30, where I show films that capture the psyche of my childhood, both the good things and the horribly traumatic things. So if you're in town, come and see us. All right, everybody, take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. And there was Humpty Dumpty, he sat on a wall. And as you know, poor Humpty Dumpty had an awful fall. Rock-a-bye baby up in a treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. But Mommy and Daddy somehow didn't know how hard the wind was going to blow.
Well, Jack and Jill and all their contemporaries had a rather bad time of it, didn't they? Nursery rhymes and fairy tales are like that. Many of them end in tragedy of some sort. I wonder why they were written that way. Could it be possible that they had their beginning as object lessons? Warning children not to go into the woods without their parents. Warning parents to be careful where they hung the baby's cradle. Warning children to stay off the wall, or they might have a bad fall. And always to be careful going down the hill, or they might wind up like Jack and Jill. But what does all this have to do with us at the telephone company? You'll see. Here's Jack. He's sort of a careful, serious-minded chap. He always plays it safe. He made up his mind that he's going places. We're quite certain that he will. Right now, he's going to work at the telephone company. What careless person could have left this garden rake here with the prong sticking up for someone to step on? I guess some people just don't think. Just a few doors down the street is where Jill lives. Recently, Jill set her alarm clock to ring a half hour earlier to avoid all the last-minute rush. But isn't it wonderful to hear the alarm, to know that you can spend another half hour in your nice, warm bed before you really have to get out? Jill thinks so, and she does. Jill is like so many of us. She likes to talk. was close. There's the bus. Don't be too hard on her, Jack. Thousands of people do that every day. The lucky ones are still with us. Well, as it always does, another bus came along. It was crowded, and Jack and Jill had to stand. But they were careful to keep hold of the safety bar above in case of sudden stops. They stood well behind the driver, obeyed the safety rules of the transportation company, and were considerate of other passengers. Well, it is nice to meet an old friend, Jill, but that's not the place to hold a conversation. Another accident somewhere. How fortunate for Jack and Jill that they work in the telephone office in safety. Be careful, Jill. That's a good way to break your arm. Wait till it slows down. That's the girl. You're learning. Well, they made it. Yes, Jack and Jill have finally arrived, safe and on time. No cars to dodge, no stop signs to watch, no buses, no danger here. There's nothing like the hazards involved in Jill's uncle's job. He's a lineman for the telephone company, and he knows he has to be careful. His body belt, safety strap, and climbers are always in perfect order. The snaps, D-rings, and buckles are regularly inspected. He's wearing the required gloves. His tools and equipment are always in excellent condition. And his climber gaffs are always secure and sharp. But of course, there's no danger here. Or is there? Actually, more people are seriously injured in falls on stairways each year than from any other single cause in company buildings. There must be a reason. There are several. The hunt is on, but a stairway is not a good hunting ground when you're looking for that lipstick. Besides, it's probably down the bottom of her purse, somewhere under the kitchen sink. Seriously, you'd be surprised at how many accidents are caused by purse hunting on stairways. Another cause for accidents is improper shoes. Beautiful, aren't they? But wear shoes like these at a party, not at the office. Sandals. Fine for going downstairs, but how about painfully stubbed toes going up? Wedgies, wonderful for lounging, but not for hiking up and down stairs. But you say, what's a girl going to do? Dress like a Gibson girl in order to be safe at her job? No, not that. But there is a compromise. Let's just call it being sensible. Now, you wouldn't say these were unattractive shoes, would you? Enclosed heel and toe, moderate, comfortable, and safe. There are places where our company can and does make it almost impossible to have an accident. Even if you were careless, you couldn't accidentally walk into trouble here. And this would make it absolutely impossible to have an accident on stairways. But it's obvious that a fence is not the answer. Uh-oh, there goes Jill again, in a hurry as usual. And the telephone company just can't provide escorts for everyone. Here's a typical cafeteria in a typical telephone company office building. Typical people. And we note some of them being typically careless. Stacking 3 cups is going a little too far. They're trays for this purpose. Jack and Jill are having lunch, too. But Jill wouldn't do that at home, would she? It might take a few seconds to put an empty tray in the proper place instead of on the floor, but it's so much safer, not to mention neatness and consideration of others. Here's an activity that might resemble your home or mine. Sometimes we get tired of things in the same old place and decide to rearrange the furniture. But there's no need to take chances by moving heavy office furniture or file cabinets, or climbing on chairs and desks to hang pictures or calendars. Our company provides experienced personnel to do this type of work when it's moving time. If there's no accident here, these people are just plain lucky. Our records include many cases where people weren't so lucky. Well, I'd say that might be an improvement, wouldn't you? Everything very functional and quite attractive and apparently safe, except for one thing. Do you see it? An exposed telephone cord. An innocent-looking little thing, isn't it? But you'd be surprised at how many phones it's broken. Our company provides trained personnel to make proper telephone and electrical installations. Call them before you move. Sometimes we get so used to doing routine things that it's hard to believe that there's any danger connected with them. Close the lower file first, then pull out the top one. And then there are times when we just don't think. Well, the irresistible force and the immovable object didn't meet this time. But such a meeting has caused hundreds of painful and sometimes serious injuries. Desks, filing cabinets, and drawers can and do hurt people. Did you ever pinch your finger in a drawer, walk into an open locker door, or pull a file cabinet over on you? There's no comedy in these errors. And the root of our trouble is absent-mindedness. Speaking of absent-mindedness, Jill, don't you think it's a good idea to walk forward when you're going somewhere? Jill could have landed on the floor with a possible skull fracture or a broken arm. And if you must slide your chair back to get into your desk drawer, look before you slide. Well, here's Jack the Careful. Nothing could ever happen to him. Jack reads all the safety signs. He's quite unlike our absent-minded Jill. Yes, Jack is careful about the obvious things. But it's the little things, like carelessly leaving a desk drawer open, that can and do cause painful and often serious accidents. Jack's carelessness could have resulted in a fractured kneecap. Well, about now you might think that surely we have covered the hazards of office work. Actually, we could spend the next hour and not cover all types of office accidents. For instance, pretty girl, pretty flowers, and just a little spilled water on the floor. It could be just as dangerous as a patch of ice on the sidewalk. This spot should have been guarded until it was wiped dry. Make safety your business. You won't be interfering with someone else's job by reporting a safety hazard. This is lots of fun. But an office building is hardly the place for such horseplay. Do you know the location of the nearest fire extinguisher? Do you know how to operate it? And we were beginning to think Jill was thoughtless. An ashtray is the only safe place for cigar and cigarette ashes. Surely no one working for the telephone company would be guilty of this most stupid trick of all. That's it. Pull out the chair and let's have a big laugh. If there's one fellow we could all do without, it's the practical joker. And there are so many more things to bear in mind for safety's sake. Like minor cuts from knives, razor blades, scissors, or even an innocent piece of paper. A serious infection can result. Take care of them immediately. And don't forget that dizziness or weakness due to starvation diets have caused many people to fall on stairways. If you must diet, eat 3 well-balanced meals a day. You'll keep your balance better. And the use of elevators requires the most supreme concentration of all. Never run to catch one. The result might be a slip, a fall, a sprained ankle, or something more serious. See what I mean? It almost happened. You've had a busy day, Jill, and you're eager to get home. But remember, elevators are like buses. Another one will come along. And incidentally, when it does, be sure it's level with the floor and a stop before you enter. Well, we've attempted to have a little fun with the most serious subject. Because Jill got into all this trouble, please don't think we're pointing the finger only at the women in our business. Someone had to play the part, and in this case, Jill was selected. We've tried, and we hope we have impressed upon each one of you that safety is a state of mind. Think safety at all times, and you won't have accidents. There's also a plus value. Thinking safety goes hand in hand with courtesy and consideration of others. An office can be one of the safest places in the world, if we make it so. Make safety your business. So Jack won't fall down and break his crown, nor Jill come tumbling after.
Youth of America, the finest physically and mentally in the entire world. Opportunity is offered them today as never before in the history of mankind. Opportunity for the fulfillment of hopes, dreams, ambitions. And with the vastness of opportunity offered, what are the ambitions of the youth of America? What of Bill, whose main interest is mechanical drawing? What's your ambition, young fellow?
I'm going to be a construction engineer. Build great modern skyscrapers, design factories, plan complete new communities.
Skyscrapers, factories, cities. An engineer. An engineer must have good eyesight, a steady hand, steady nerves. He must have the mental creativeness that emanates from physical well-being. And physical well-being, Bill, is attained only through good living habits. And what of you, Betty? What's your ambition?
I want to be a famous musician, give concerts, and work in radio and television.
A musician, an actress, anyone in the public eye must have fine appearance in addition to talent. And beauty and excellent appearance result from good health, Betty, good nutrition. Plenty of sleep and exercise are basic to health. Today, John works industriously in his school shop class. Anyone who flies or works with planes must have excellent physical and mental coordination, John. Coordination comes from practice and training of a healthy body and mind. Grace works diligently in her chemistry laboratory, and for a particular reason. She's going to be a nurse. A modern Florence Nightingale. She already knows that scientific knowledge of foods, proper diet, is the very foundation of buoyant health. And Fred, his major interest is botany, studying the science of plant life. For Fred loves the great outdoors, and he knows that just as trees and flowers need sunlight and proper nourishment, so also do human beings require good nutrition for good health. And what of Mary's ambition as she learns to plan and prepare meals in her home economics class? Good preparation for a future homemaker. First, a taste of business life, a small but vital part of the pulse beat of the world of industry and commerce. Then her own home and family, a successful wife and mother rearing strong, healthy children. Training them as she was trained in the basic fact that good food today means a successful tomorrow. And tomorrow, in millions of homes, life begins with the alarm clock. And in this home, after plenty of sleep and fresh air, John is assured of good future hours of the day. Looks like he's going to get some exercise, too. And there's something else waiting to help start the day. Yes, life really begins with breakfast. But regardless of how good the all-important morning meal, it can't possibly supply all the nutriment required for an entire day. Now, just what do we mean by good food? Food that tastes good, of course. And much more important, food that's good for us. Certain foods are essential. We must have them daily for the sake of health. Someone must have an appetite. But don't worry, this collection of food is not for a single meal. It represents the groups of foods that are needed for the whole day. Meat, cheese, fish, poultry. Vegetables, green and yellow. Fruits, 2 or more servings daily. At least 1 raw, citrus fruit or tomato often. And eggs, 3 to 5 a week, but 1 a day preferred. Cereal and bread, rich golden butter. And milk to drink, combined with other foods, in ice cream and in cheese. But at least 1 quart of milk a day, every day. For fast-growing young people, more than a quart. For adults, at least a pint. Yes, sir, this is really a day's good eating. And I mean good eating, for it's important that we enjoy our meals. Eating should be fun. Part of the enjoyment can come from having these foods prepared in our favorite ways and grouped in meals as we like them best. The essential thing is to include all the nutrients needed daily by choosing from these types of foods. Let's have a quick look at 3 typical meals. Breakfast for the average person. First, an orange. That checks off your citrus fruit. Then an egg and 2 slices of piping hot toast. If you're an adult, you may want a cup of coffee. And lunch for Mr. Average Citizen. A bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich with crisp coleslaw and a juicy baked apple for dessert. All good foods to help meet daily requirements. Then dinner. Steak, baked potato, green peas, a lettuce salad with a tasty dressing, and a fresh homemade roll. Still more foods that taste good and are good for you. Surely these 3 meals fill all nutritional requirements. Or do they? Let's check them against this chart. The bars represent the different food factors, such as vitamins and minerals, in the amounts needed by a person for a day. Let's see how the 3 meals rate. Uh-oh, each bar would be orange all the way across if the meals were complete. Obviously, something's missing. Let's try adding some dairy products. Some butter for that toast. And how about some butter for that sandwich? Now some cheese. The baked potato calls for butter, and so do the peas in the roll. Let's choose ice cream for the dinner dessert. And of course, a glass of milk with every meal. Now what does the chart show? What a difference! By including enough milk and milk products in each meal, we reach the goal. 100% of each of the food factors needed for health. Might try checking up on your own meals. So, whenever you eat, wherever you eat, whether it be one of the 3 regular meals, such as a well-balanced school lunch, or a quick pickup like this happy lad is enjoying, or perhaps an enticing homemade milkshake and a toasted cheese sandwich on an after-a-date raid of the icebox. Whenever you eat smartly. Young people need plenty of food, the right kinds of food. For good food means good health, for zest in working, for spirit in playing, for ability to accomplish your aims and ambitions, for the manifestation of your hopes and dreams and desires. Good food today and every day is tomorrow's harvest, a harvest of energy and accomplishment, a harvest of health, happiness, and zestful living.
How's the production coming on your hydraulic cylinder? Oh, we've had a nice increase in production since we started honing. Let's take a look at the job. How's your boy, Jim?
Hey, he's just fine. Had a letter from him just the other day. Say, he likes it.
That's the stuff. Yeah, he's a fine lad. It's straight and round, all right, but it's a 1/2,000 under for size.
That's right. We'll have to run that through again. The size tolerance on these bores is plus 3/10,000ths minus nothing. You see, Jim, on these government jobs, we're only allowed a one-way size tolerance. Unilateral tolerances. We're allowed something minus or something plus, but never both, as we were on regular commercial jobs. You better reset that microsize.
Well, that's easy. One thing about these machines, when you get them set, there's nothing to worry about.
Well, in a way, Jim's a good machine man, but he's new on these hones. Now, don't forget, it's up to you to set the table travel and the micro size. And you've got to be careful to do it just right. After that, you can run jobs through all day with only a few resettings, because the control is built right into the honing equipment.
Seems to be made for this job, all right.
In every case, they design the equipment especially for the job it's going to do. Now, while you're running that hydraulic cylinder through, Jim, I'm going to tell you about some of the things they've done and what they're doing now. The first big job was on automobiles. Back in the 20s, a 26-horsepower automobile engine weighed 1,875 pounds. By 1941, an engine that weighed only 558 pounds was producing 90 horsepower. This increased efficiency was made possible by better metals, better design, better machining. One of the most important steps in better machining was the development of the honing process. More accurate surfaces for many working parts of the engine could be generated by honing in mass production. Most of the bearing surfaces in automotive engines have been made better by honing. The greater accuracy obtained by honing permits closer control of precision fitting, closer control of uniform size, which is obtainable by honing, permits interchangeability of parts. The ability to generate any type or degree of surface finish makes for reduced wear, longer operating life, better, more uniform lubrication, and increased operating efficiency. Of course, honing of cylinder bores was the first big step forward that helped to make automobile engines last longer. It gave us closer tolerances and higher compression. At the same time, it shortened the breaking-in period. All these advantages given by honing were needed by the entire automotive industry. And so, better commercial trucks were made. From the engineering lessons learned, we are making better military vehicles of many kinds, from the bounding Jeep, made to take plenty of punishment, to the big trucks with 4, 6, and 8-wheel drives. All of the hard-working Army trucks, Jeeps, and half-tracks are doing better jobs because important working parts have accurately honed surfaces. In fact, the hone has improved every kind of transportation. The diesel engine is a better power generator today because the cylinders, fuel injectors, and bearing bores are micro-finished on specially designed hones. And so Uncle Sam's submarines and other naval vessels can depend on their diesel engines to take them thousands of miles across the sea. Just as American-made tanks with diesel power give dependable service far from any supply depot. Even the hard-hitting guns on our tanks have been improved by honing. Ordnance engineers require the rifle barrels of modern guns to be so finished as to provide maximum muzzle velocity of projectile. And so a hone not only finishes the surfaces of the lands, but also the surfaces of the grooves of the rifling. Specially designed hones for this job generate the kind of surface finish which will least retard the projectile as it spins out of the barrel. Some gun chambers are now taper generated by honing. It's believed that this method of generating a surface on the chamber bore reduces the danger of the cartridge case sticking to the walls of the chamber after firing. Besides gun barrel bores and shell chambers, there's another important application in the hydraulic recoil mechanism. And still another hydraulic application of honing is in the finishing of the bores of all kinds of pumps. In aircraft, hydraulics have made the landing gears better. For the final processing of the landing gear shock strut cylinders, microfinish honing is widely used throughout the world. The landing gear oleo cylinders are honed in 1 or 2 operations on a standard honing machine. Hydraulic cylinders used to operate the wing flaps are also micro-finished. Maximum accuracy and smoothness are essential in this cylinder, as the assembly must pass an inspection involving hydraulic pressure of 2,500 pounds per square inch. When it comes to aircraft power, there is much evidence to show that honing has made it possible to add power and speed and yet cut down weight. More and more power is built into the engines of modern planes. Today, aircraft engines weigh only 1 pound per horsepower. To a great extent, this increased efficiency has been gained without sacrificing safety because of better accuracy and surface quality produced by honing. The crank pin bores and the master connecting rods of radial engines are micro-finished, and so are the wrist pin bores and tandem knuckle pin bores. And still other special hones are used to surface the bores in aircraft engine articulated rods. The carrier ring is another one of the many aircraft engine parts that is being precision honed in regular production. As you said, Jim, this finer machining isn't difficult because most of the controls are built right into the honing equipment. As long as you watch your settings, get them right, you're sure to turn out the highly accurate work that's demanded today. Yeah, that's okay now. You see, Jim, all that I've been telling you is part of the progress that we're making. And you're part of it. This isn't just a hone. This means faster airplanes, safer, better planes, better guns and jeeps and tanks, diesel engines, truck engines, gun recoils, gun barrels, shell chambers, many other parts. Precision machines like the Micromatic hone are more than just machines. They represent more useful mechanical achievements and even better services for tomorrow.
This film is about an idea we call the polymorphic concept of data processing system design, which is a complicated name for an idea, we admit. But the idea itself isn't so complicated when you think of it in terms of how people get machines to help solve their problems. Now, if you have a problem to be computed, you take it to a computer. And as your problems get bigger, you need a bigger computer. As more and more guys like you have problems to solve, they take turns on the computer, which isn't so bad if the computer is fast enough, which it can be if it is big enough and expensive enough. But as the number of guys and the number of problems increase, the machine gets huge. Isn't that a waste? Because while one guy is using the computer to solve an easy problem, which may only be taking 1/1000th of the computer, everyone else has to wait. Unless you spend still more money and buy a still bigger computer. But worse, if one piece fails, the whole computer will probably quit, even though most of it is perfectly good, ready, and willing to work. What's wrong here? To start with, if you look inside, you see that it isn't just one solid hunk of computer, but a lot of individual parts and circuits which each have specialized functions. Now it would be nice if someone would divide the huge computer into little parts, unsolder the connections, so that everybody could get a chance to use the parts he needs for his particular problem. Next, you will want to organize things a little. Not in the usual way, where the brainy computer part not only supervises everything, but also insists on doing a large share of the detail work. What you want is more delegation, a more easygoing, cooperative relationship between all the parts so that they can associate freely and directly with one another and in various ways. Isn't this a lot of fun? Actually, of course, the electronic boxes don't move. You just make a nice, flexible, automatic switchboard connection like the telephone company does. That way, the computer boxes, the real brains of the system, don't have to waste their time and talents acting like telephone operators, trying to handle every single message personally. They can stick to computing and let the other boxes do the detail work, such as remembering large number of facts or sending messages from one box to another or carrying out simple logical routines. And so, each computer box doesn't have to be so big now. This is distributed control, distributed memory, distributed arithmetics, distributed everything. And it makes sense, because now more than one guy can be using the system at the same time to solve a number of easy problems. And when those occasional crash problems come along, your system can reconnect itself in a matter of microseconds to get the big, urgent jobs done, as well as an ordinary giant computer could do them. And if one box quits, it's no great catastrophe. The system just automatically switches the job to another box. If you find yourself getting the busy signal too often, you buy more of exactly the kind of boxes you need. That's like adding on new subscribers as they move in. Or you can add more displays so that more people can see what goes on. Suppose your problem calls for a lot of detailed work to do most of the time. Then you buy boxes to give you all the memory or messenger service or whatever else you need. On the other hand, if your problems are mostly heavy-duty brain work, you can load your system up with computer boxes. When you really need it, and can prove you need it, you can put together a big system, or even a really, really big one, without over-investing early, or throwing anything away, or starting from scratch again. So you save money. And all the while, you have better reliability, and multiple use, and better access. You can even switch together 2 complexes, or 3, or 4, like a nationwide telephone system. Or you can connect in one of those ordinary giant computers as a subscriber if you go for super systems. And this doesn't mean that you end up with one big party line. You can keep some of the lines private by opening a few switches permanently, so that certain information won't be available to nosy subscribers. And so now you see that it wasn't just exactly a computer you wanted, but a group of guys with brains and a group of boxes with electronic brains and consoles and displays, all connected together in varying ways and growing together so that the partnership can solve more problems per dollar than each group could solve by itself. And this is all there is to the data processing concept known as polymorphic, many-shaped, or multiple mode, or the matrix concept, or maybe just the common sense switchboard idea in data processing systems. Now it just so happens that Thomson Ramo Wooldridge has been working on the polymorphic idea for several years. And in case you hadn't already guessed, we have built the first actual polymorphic system. If you're interested, let us know.
Author of 5 well-known books on watercolor, the most recent, Painting the Main Scene in Watercolor, establishes Herb Olsen as a foremost authority on this exciting aspect of painting. Herb Olsen was one of only 58 living painters chosen for representation in the historic 200 Years of Watercolor Painting in America exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He has won 70 major awards, including the National Academy's first prize. Mr. Olsen knows well and paints beautifully the many moods of the sea.
Like any other artist who is not too familiar with where he is going to find his picture, I take my car and ride around until I find a place that looks to me like it will make a good picture. I then walk around and with my hands frame the various objects around the landscape and use these particular elements in my picture. I then make a pencil sketch, which is actually a solvent watercolor pen, and using the line, I take the elements and place them where I believe they will be shown at their best advantage. After finishing my pen sketch, I then moisten the paper where I have placed the darks and work around getting my darks formed to my picture, putting in the weeds and the other elements that are in the drawing. This drawing is made on a rough watercolor paper called Darches. It's a 300-pound paper and very heavy so that it will prevent buckling when I put in my wet washes. After doing a rather careful pencil drawing, I then place the mascoid, it's a masking solution, which is a form of rubber cement impervious to watercolor, so that I can paint over this to retain my lights or my whites. I also believe in putting the entire tube of paint on my palette because the paint is permanent. We have tested it. It will last for 300 years. Then wet your palette with an eyedropper, wet the paint with an eyedropper so that you'll be able to use it immediately. Rather than using a brush to wet my paper, I like to use a sponge because it has a soft feeling, and I'm also able to take out oil spots, which happen many times on hand rag paper. Then with a larger brush, I paint a warm color over the sky. In this particular case, it was yellow ochre. And then when the painting was still damp, not wet, I took Payne's gray and with a few strokes diagonally across the sky, painted it so it would give the feeling of late day. I, of course, like to work all over the picture like many artists do, and this is so that you can see the entire picture before you get too much detail into it. I work, as you can see, from light to dark, and without exception, always put in my background first. I keep my eyes half closed so that I can see the values, knowing that I'm not going to get too dark immediately. Then before I go into the lighthouse, I am going to be sure that my sky is not wet, because then the lighthouse will bleed into the sky and lose form and shape. This is just a simple color. It is against a late afternoon sky so that there is very little light on it and will silhouette against it. In painting the wooded area, I painted the strokes upwardly to give the feeling of the trees and the brush growing the way nature intended it to grow. I used several colors in this, and using my brush rather dry to give the twiggy feeling of the ends of the trees. Using a half-inch brush in the foreground, I then painted in little rocks and accented the background with a few darks. I then took my mirror to double check it, both for drawing and for values. This reverses my painting, and it also doubles my distance so that it becomes smaller and I see it as an entire picture. I then placed my rocks working all over the picture so that the continuity of the darks and the lights would then begin to make some sense. Taking my 1.5-inch brush, I then stroked the blue towards the shore to give the feeling of the tide rolling in. I paint the sea, when it is not too rough, in a horizontal manner. Then I took my aquarelle brush and placed a few darks to give the feeling of movement in the water. This is done to give the painting dimension. I then took my number 8 brush, pointed brush, and dabbed little dots here and there, which then would suggest stones or other debris that might be on the beach. Painting the lighthouse and giving it more dimension was a necessary step so that the mood of twilight would come through. There is suggestion of a little light, but very, very little. Then I took my fan brush and with a few strokes, stroking upwardly, giving the feeling of a weeded area. This can be done very, very freely, without too much thought or planning, because weeds are not planned. They just grow where they want to. The name of this fan brush is suggested by its shape. I then hesitate here and there to give the action of the weeds a little more of a casual feeling. This will enhance the freedom of the painting. I then take the other end of the 1-inch brush, which has a pointed tip, to give a little light to the weeds. After this is done, I add a few more darks and try to visualize the continuity of the darks so that the picture will hold together. When I am satisfied that this has been accomplished, I use the rubber cement pickup, which takes off the masking solution. Here I am able to achieve, in a very simple manner, wavy, foamy actions that the ocean produces around rocks and the surf, which gives the feeling of spray. I also used it on the weeds, and in doing this, I could then again get a rather careless and unplanned method of portraying a little small item like weeds. I took my mirror, double-checked it again to find out whether I needed anything else. And I then added a few warm notes in the lighthouse. Took my scratcher, which is a spoon contraption that looks very much like a end of a razor blade and picked out some more whites. Placing the figures in the background was a very interesting operation because I felt that the painting needed a little color. And red, being my favorite color, would have to go into this picture. Using a very simple method of just a few strokes, this was accomplished. I then decided that the lighthouse was a little too brittle. So then again with my sponge, I softened the edges. I also use a blotter where I want to wipe out certain areas. I will always use a blotter with an enamel-backed finish because using a blotter that is not will give me the crumbs of the blotter on my work and sometimes destroy the effect. I like to work until my painting is almost finished before I put in my final darks. This is what gives the painting life. After double checking the picture again with my mirror, I then placed a mat on it so that I could see it without any disturbing elements around it. And looking at it in the mirror again, I found that it needed just a few more accents with a few added darks. This is the completed picture of rocks and surf. A fog scene is usually painted from light to dark. This is the method that most artists use and very successful. I have found another way to paint a fog scene. I paint the entire picture as though it were in sunlight or in a clear light so that all the objects are in themselves very clear. After they have been painted, I then take my sponge rather wet. I then rub horizontally across the paper, including the boat and some of the rocks in the background, being a little bit more careful on the elements that are closer to me. Since fog comes in layers, the reason for me working horizontally is because that is the actual action of a fog. If I were painting rain, it would be the complete opposite, coming in vertical strokes, but I would still use my sponge or even a wet paper. I then went into some of the rocks in the foreground so that I would get a little form. This was done obliquely. I have not worked on the rock which is in the direct foreground. Using my blotter, I can then get added form to the rocks after wetting it. I took my aquarelle brush, which is a 1-inch brush, and painted a few more accents, and this gave it more form. For painting the shore, I used the same sponge to give it that same softness. And then with my brush and using the chisel end of the brush, I write in the rivulets of the sand, which gives the feeling of the freedom that the sea itself places upon the shoreline. I then continue to put in further accents on the hills in the background because they seem to fade away too quickly. I felt that the boat in the background was not quite far enough away. So again, with clear water, brush the sponge horizontally so that it would go back into the fog. After this, I went back to the foreground and took an ordinary emery board, which we used to file our nails with, using the rough side, and in a circular motion, I grind the board itself, being sure that it is flat on the paper to give the feeling of spray. This, with the addition of the lights that I left against the rock, gives the feeling of the movement of the water against the rock. After this had been done, I used my mirror to double check again. In my many years of watercolor painting, I have made many observations. One of them going up to Prout's Neck to visit the studio of Winslow Homer. And in his ledger was this statement: "Although I have spent my life painting in oil, you will see that I will be remembered by my watercolor."